Jeff Glass Ministries presents Jesus Said This to Me. Here is your host, Jeff Glass.
Hey guys, this is the second video in a series I've done and will continue to do called Recognizing Jesus' Voice, or How to Recognize Jesus' Voice. I just made that video not too long ago. And now I said in that video that I would make another video of times where Jesus spoke to me. So this is the first of those. I have lots of stories where Jesus spoke to me, and the idea is if I share with you these stories of how Jesus actually spoke to me, then maybe you would see something in them and recognize that Jesus is speaking to you, possibly in the same way. And that would help you recognize his voice. So you can use all of my stories together as examples of how Jesus might speak to you. And I said in that first video that Jesus normally speaks to people about their own personal life, not about global politics or world economics. It's mostly what he wants you to do, what he wants you to say, how he wants you to spend your time in your life, and things like that. Maybe priorities or attitudes that you have that you shouldn't have, he's going to speak to you about that, or how you treat your spouse or your kids. So anyway, so here's some of my stories. So let's just get started. A while back, I had a business of lawn care business, and I was mowing a field in front of a flower shop and a craft store, and that's all it was an empty field, and they'd like to keep it mowed because it draws attention to their store, which was behind that field. And so I'm mowing, and it's very hot. It's July in Texas, so it's 102 degrees or so. Very hot, no shade. And the store had tied a bunch of balloons on top of a pole at the corner, one of the corners of this field. So I was mowing, I look up and I see these balloons, and suddenly they came untied by themselves. They just came untied, and they went to the right. This is like 40, 50 feet up in the air. They went to the right, and then when they got to the corner of the field, they turned right again and went down to the next corner of the field, then turned right again, went to the other corner, then turned right again, came all the way back up right to where the pole was. And I thought to myself, wow, that's very unusual for that to happen. Just go around in a big circle just right over the corners of the field. That's unusual. And then the balloons left again and did the exact same thing, circled the entire field from corner to corner, right back to the pole again. I thought to myself, to do that once is probable. To do that twice is highly improbable, not likely. And then they took off again and did the same thing, went around the field from corner to corner and then back to the pole. And I thought, now this is completely unusual, highly improbable, really not even possible. And I thought, what's going on? Because I was the only one noticing this. And so I had a sense that this is for me. And I said, what's going on? And God spoke right then. And he said, these are the things that you haven't dealt with yet. These are the things that you haven't killed, that you haven't dealt a death blow to. You will continue to struggle with them, and they will keep coming around and around and around the rest of your life until you deal a death blow to them. And then the balloons flew off down the street. So I've remembered that, and that was over 40 years ago. And I think this is one of the ways God speaks to us. Number one, he has to get your attention. So he got my attention by showing me something highly unusual, highly improbable, almost impossible, really. and that got my attention. And didn't he do that with Moses? Didn't he show him a bush that was on fire, but the bush was not being consumed? And he said to himself, I'm going to draw near to this thing and look at this. And so once God had his attention, then God spoke to him. And another way you can tell that Jesus is speaking to you is he will say something to you that you normally would not say to yourself. A lot of people say, how can I distinguish between Jesus talking to me and me just thinking that way? Well, it's because one way is he will speak to you in a way that you would not normally speak to yourself, or he speak to you about something that you normally wouldn't think about. So that's a clue whenever that happens to you. So, I paid attention to what he said that time. There are many times in these stories where sometimes I did pay attention and I got what he was saying, and sometimes I didn't pay attention and I missed it. So let me give you one of those times. I was moving out of the dormitory. This was years ago, and I had a blue stuffed chair with a blue ottoman. Very nice, very comfortable to sit in. And I had a room in the dorm by myself, so it was very nice. Well, it was time for me to move out because I graduated. This was in the summertime. And I kept thinking to myself, well, what am I going to do with this blue chair? And since I lived in the dorm and other people were moving in, I thought, I'll sell it, because surely there'll be some guy here that'll want to buy it, just moving in. And the thought came to me, loud and clear, give it to Beverly. Give the chair to Beverly. And Beverly was a good friend of mine. And she lived in the girls' dorm. She wasn't my girlfriend. She was another guy's girlfriend. We all went to church together. And I just ignored that. I just totally ignored that. I was like, well, what's that? I think I'll sell it. Well, how much should I ask for it? Oh, these guys don't have any money. And I don't want to move it. It's a lot of trouble to move it downstairs and then somewhere else upstairs where I'm going to move. So I was like, well, I guess I'll sell it for $40. That's not too high. It's worth something, it's $40. I'll get something for it, but it's not out of range for these guys. And while I'm sitting there thinking about that, while I'm moving stuff out of the room, I keep hearing this, give it to Beverly. I must have heard that phrase, give it to Beverly, probably 7 times, maybe 10 in the course of moving. And I believe I had it for sale on the bulletin board at the dorm. So some guy came up and said, hey, you want $40 for that blue chair? Man, I'll buy it. Here's $40. I said, okay, it's yours. You take it out of the room. And so he came and got it, and I was like, there. As I looked at the $40, I thought, well, this really isn't very much. It's not really going to help me that much. Well, lo and behold, even though I graduated, I stayed in the city and I stayed at the church that I was at. And then one day, another girl, who was a friend of Beverly's and we're a member of the same church, just in passing, told a group of us, she said, does any of you know someone who might have a chair, large stuffed chair with a recline, with an ottoman? Beverly has been praying for several months for a chair like that she could sit in and study and read in her room. It's even difficult for me to tell you this story because that comment she made stabbed me right in the heart. And I thought, God wanted to use me to bless Beverly, answer her prayers, she would be so excited, so joyful that God answered her prayer. And I missed it. God had chosen me to fulfill that answer to prayer. And I decided I'd rather have money than do what he was telling me. And honestly, I thought that was just me talking. That's what I thought. Oh, this is just me. But why am I thinking that? I mean, see, that's not normally something I would think. And so then when I heard that comment that Beverly had been praying for a chair and an ottoman, I knew right away, well, Jesus was telling me that. So unfortunately, that's one of the ways you learn to recognize Jesus' voice, is when he's telling you something and you don't do it, and then later something like that happens, you find out that, wow, what you were hearing matches exactly what this other person was praying for, or what this other person is saying. So God was speaking to you about that. And that's one of the ways you learn to recognize Jesus' voice. See, from then on, I could say, well, now I'm certain what Jesus' voice sounds like, because I'm certain that was him speaking to me, even though I missed it and didn't obey. So there's a couple of ways that God speaks and ways you can recognize Jesus' voice. Another time, I was painting a house inside. And I was painting and painting and painting. That's what I did for a living for a while. And so I was inside painting this house. And I had some good friends, married couple with 4 kids. And I'd always go to their house and we'd share about scriptures and things at least once a week over at their house around the kitchen table. And so I was sitting there painting, and by the way, they always had financial trouble because they had 4 kids, and off and on her husband would get laid off and get a new job and get laid off again. So from time she didn't work, so from time to time they'd be struggling financially, and I'd give them some money. And I had no problem doing it. I love to give and help people. So I'm painting, and the Lord says, I want you to give $100 to the Millimans. And I said, okay, I'll give them $100 when at church on Sunday. And the Lord yelled at me. I mean, yelled at me. Give it to him now! And so I definitely knew that was God. He never yelled at me before. And the reason he yelled at me is because that was my tendency, that was my lifestyle, to keep putting things off to another time. I would always say, oh, I'll do that later. I'll do that next weekend. Oh, we can take care of that later. And that's kind of how I lived. And so basically, I did things when I felt like doing them. And God wanted me to do things when he told me to, whether I felt like it or not. So that's why he yelled at me. So I immediately finished that wall, because you can't just leave a wall half painted. It's not going to look good. So I finished painting the half a wall, wrapped up all my roller and paint and everything in plastic, and keep it for the next day. Locked up the house and went over to the Milliman's house. And I pulled up outside their house, and there he is out mowing the grass. Well, he turns to look at me, and I'm looking at him serious like, and he's looking at me, and he just starts laughing, because he knew right away that God had spoken to me and told me to come and give him money. He knew that, because I've done that many times with him. where God told me to give him money. And I said, well, I got your money right here that God told me to come and give you. And he said, man, thanks. And then he told me what he had done. He said, I had to pay the car insurance, but we don't have any money in the bank. So I wrote a check and mailed it to him. But there's no money in the bank to cover that check. And it was Friday. I said, let's go get this check in the bank and cover that check that you wrote. And then I told him, don't ever do that again. Don't write bad checks. And so it was a great time, him and me. You know, I heard the Lord. He spoke to me. He got his money that he needed. It was great. And so, you know, God yelled at me. That may be another way you can recognize it's his voice. I wouldn't yell at myself. I mean, and I heard it really loud. Well, here's another thing. I'm just going to keep telling stories. So here's another thing. I was painting a house. I think it might have been the same house. And I listened to Christian radio all the time while I was painting. There was no one in this house. It was for rent. So I'm painting, and before I started, I said, God, today I'm not going to listen to Christian radio. I am going to turn the radio off, and I am just going to listen to you. So I am open to you speaking to me, and I'm listening fervently. I'm concentrating on hearing your voice, and I'll just sit here in silence. If I don't hear anything, I'll just keep being quiet until I hear you speak. So I painted and painted and painted and painted. I start about 8:30, and about 11 o'clock, you know, 3 hours later, I'm still sitting there painting, and I haven't heard one thing. I mean, I've literally heard nothing. And I didn't even think about anything. I didn't start daydreaming or thinking of things. I cleared my mind and kept it clear. And so I just stopped painting. And I said, Jesus, I've been listening all morning for you to speak to me, and I haven't heard anything. Then Jesus spoke. You know why you haven't heard anything? I said, man, I should get some paper and a pen and write this down. He's going to tell me some great secret as to why I didn't hear anything. And I didn't have any paper or pen. So I said, okay, why? Why am I not hearing anything? He said, because I haven't said anything. And we both laughed. It was like Jesus was telling a joke. I haven't said anything, that's why. I'm like, oh, okay. But see, he just said something to me right then, right? So you see, again, that's one of the ways you recognize that Jesus is speaking to you. He tells you something you wouldn't have even thought of or spoke that out loud to yourself or to anybody else. You wouldn't even have thought that. So he breaks into our thinking. He interrupts our thinking and the way we do things with, you know, like, surprise, here I am. And you're like, oh, you know, because it is him. And it's different than what you would think or say. Well, since I've been talking about my friends, I'll say another time that I was painting. And I had made a commitment to the Lord. I had said, God, I am willing to give whatever you want me to give. I'm willing to give all my money if you want. Whatever you want, I'll give it. Because I said to myself one day, I said, you know, I have to surrender everything to Jesus. And that includes my money. I'm kind of a money guy. I was always interested in money and savings and things like that. And always calculating. And I said, and one day you're going to lay your hand on my money and tell me you want to give it. So I'm making a commitment right now to you that when you do that, I will give it and I will do what you say. So here I was painting, and the Lord interrupted me and said, I want you to give some money to the Millemans. And I knew from the tone of voice he spoke that to me, I knew that this was it. I said, okay, Jesus, this is it. You're going to lay your hands on my money. You're going to touch my money and say you want it. I said, whatever it is, I'm willing to do it. And he said, I said, I'll give $100 to the Millemans. And the Lord said, that's what you want to give them. Do you want to know what I want you to give them? You know, I thought about it for a while. I was like, well, do I want to know that? Do I really want to know that? Because if I know it, I'm going to have to do it, right? But then I thought, yeah, I can't say, no, I don't want to know that. So I said, this is it. I surrender everything. And I said, okay, Lord, how much do you want to give him? He said, I want you to give him $1,000. And I said, you know, I was going to use that $1,000 to pay down the credit card. It wouldn't have paid it off, but, you know, $1,000 would go a good ways on paying that credit card down. I said, I was going to use that to pay down a credit card. And this is what God spoke to me. He said, could you spend another year paying off that credit card? I mean, could you just spend another year making payments and pay that off? I said, yeah, I could. That wouldn't be a big deal. He said, but it would be a big deal to the Millemans if you didn't give them this $1,000. I said, then I'll give it. And I said, again, I said, I'll give it to him at church on Sunday. So this was, again, like Friday. So that's how I normally would do things. And I told him on Sunday at church that God had spoken to me, and I'm giving you this check. I didn't tell him how much it was. I folded it up, put it in an envelope. I said, here's a check for you, and you just don't open it till you get home. So they were thrilled to get that. And they told me they had quite a few bills they needed to pay, so more than one, 2, 3 bills, so that was great. And see, so again, God told me something that was unusual. It was something I wouldn't have said to myself at a time when I wouldn't have thought of it. So that's one way you can recognize Jesus' voice. He will always be interrupting you when you don't expect it. You see, and that way, it's not your thinking, because you don't interrupt yourself with thinking, because you usually are thinking along certain lines and you keep a train of thought. But Jesus breaks into that and interrupts you and says something else. So that's one way. Another example of you see how Jesus has spoken to me, and perhaps this is going to help you. So, so let me tell you about another one with the Millemans, and several with them. And now this is after some time, after several years of Jesus speaking to me, and me recognizing his voice and learning how to respond immediately to him. I was getting much better at instantly recognizing him and instantly doing what he said or speaking out what he said. So I had heard about this church in New Orleans called Victory Fellowship, and they had some really great worship music from their worship band. And I had bought myself this CD And it was so awesome that I bought another one to give to Sherry, his wife, because she doesn't work, she stays home. And I thought this is going to be a great Christmas present for her. And so it was about a week before Christmas, and I went over there, and I had the CD all wrapped up. And she was sitting at the kitchen table, and I sat down, and I said, I want to give you this CD for Christmas. I got one for myself, and it's awesome. It's from Victory Fellowship in New Orleans. It is just awesome. It's called Elevator Music. Get it? Going up. And she looked at me, and she had this disappointing look, and I thought, wow, what's wrong? I'm giving her a CD. And she goes, my CD player broke, and I don't have a CD player. The words just came pouring out of my mouth. I didn't even have to think about it. They just came rushing out of my mouth. I said, one of your kids is going to give you a CD player for Christmas. Her son was standing right there next to me, and he goes, well, I might as well give it to her now. And he went back into his bedroom and brought out the CD player for his mom's Christmas present. And she, dumbfounded, just looked at me and said, have you been talking to him? And I said, no, God just told me right then, in that split second, that one of your kids, I didn't know who, was going to give you a CD player. God just told me that in a split second, and I just pumped it right out as soon as he told me. And she was just dumbfounded. And so, just telling you that story, I'm dumbfounded too. It's like, boom, it just popped out. Didn't even have to think about it. I didn't try to form words. They just came out. And see, so the amazing thing there is that she got to see that God really does speak, that Jesus really does speak about things and meet your needs ahead of time. She didn't ask anybody for a CD player. I guess her son just noticed that she needed one, and he got one. And now he, as a teenager, is standing there, and he knows that a person can hear Jesus speaking, because he heard me say it, and Jesus spoke it to me. And he was dumbfounded and amazed. And he was just awesome chance or revelation to him that, you see, Jesus really does speak to people about things. So as a teenager, that was a great boost to his faith to truly believe in Jesus.
We hope these true stories will help you to hear and recognize Jesus speaking to you. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Thank you for watching.